Sunday mornings in my house usually begin like clockwork. The smell of coffee, the soft clink of a spoon, sunlight crawling across the kitchen tiles. Everything feels calm, predictable. But that morning, something in the air shifted. Luke walked in, humming like a man who had nothing to hide, phone in hand, grin too wide to be innocent. He kissed my forehead. "Morning, babe," he said. "I'm exhausted. The guys and I went a little wild last night." I smiled, because that's what good wives do when their gut starts whispering. "Oh? What did you do?" I asked, pretending not to notice the hesitation behind his smile. "Just poker and beers at Mark's. You know, the usual." He said it casually, tossing the words over his shoulder as he walked away. But when I leaned closer, I smelled it. Not smoke, not beer. Perfume. Sweet. Expensive. Definitely not mine. I didn't say a word. I just watched him disappear down the hall while I stirred my coffee until it went cold. My hands felt steady, but inside, something started to shift. The tiniest tremor in my trust. Later, when he was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the counter. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. A message from Carl lit up the screen. "Still can't believe we ended up at Dylan's." My heart skipped. At Dylan's? But he said Mark's. And just like that, the first crack in his perfect story began to spread. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing. Men mix up names, right? Maybe Carl was drunk, maybe I was being paranoid. But all through breakfast, his laughter grated on me. Too loud, too casual. He looked like a man who'd slept well. I watched the way he scrolled through his phone between bites of toast, smiling at something I couldn't see. And that perfume? It lingered, stubborn, floating around him like a secret I wasn't meant to find. By noon, the house was quiet again. He'd gone to shower, and I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the steam curling from my mug. Every instinct in me screamed that something didn't line up. You can feel it, that ache in your chest when you know someone's lying but hasn't realized you've noticed. My fingers itched to reach for his phone again, but I waited. I've learned that timing is everything when you're about to dismantle a lie. When he came back downstairs, towel over his shoulders, I looked at him differently. "Rough night?" I asked. He nodded, stretching like a man free of guilt. "Yeah, poker and beers," he said again. Same story, same lazy tone. But now, every word was evidence. I smiled back, calm and steady, like a woman who believed him. But inside, I was replaying that text, those names, and that perfume. Because once a lie takes shape, it never stays still. It starts to move, and I was ready to follow it wherever it went. The rest of that day moved like slow honey. Thick, heavy, impossible to swallow. Luke acted normal, whistling as he mowed the lawn, calling out from the yard like nothing was wrong. And I played along, wearing my best version of peace. But my mind wouldn't stop looping back to that message. Dylan's. It echoed in my head like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. By late afternoon, I'd already built a timeline in my mind. Every word he'd said, every hour unaccounted for. I've always believed that truth doesn't need protection. Lies, though, they need maintenance. They need consistency, rehearsals, teamwork. So, if his story was real, everyone's version should match. And if it didn't, well, then I'd finally know what my intuition had been trying to tell me. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but deep down, I was already packing my patience like a weapon. That night, as he drifted off on the couch, I studied him in the dim light. The man I married looked peaceful, but I couldn't stop wondering who he really was when I wasn't watching. Somewhere between his steady breathing and the soft hum of the television, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd ask his friends. Not directly, not accusingly, just enough to tug at the threads. Because if his story didn't match, I'd make sure mine would. Perfectly. The next afternoon, I called Mark. Not out of anger, not even curiosity, just calculation. I kept my tone light, casual, the way wives do when they're pretending not to interrogate. "Hey, Mark, thanks for having Luke over last night," I said, forcing a smile I knew he couldn't see. I'm glad he got to relax with you guys. There was a pause, a small, heavy silence that told me he was thinking. Then he said, "Oh yeah, sure." Though he didn't stay long. Said he had to pick something up for you. My fingers tightened around the phone. Pick something up for me? That was new. Right. Of course, I said, keeping my voice as calm as my racing heart would allow. After we hung up, I sat there, the words repeating like static in my head. It wasn't just the lie that hurt. It was how easily it came, how natural it sounded. And maybe what frightened me most was how natural I sounded pretending to believe it. But curiosity has a way of mutating into clarity. I called Dylan next. He answered between laughs, music in the background. Oh yeah, Luke was here for a bit. Brought takeout, left before midnight. Midnight. My chest tightened. Mark said he left early, Dylan said midnight, and Carl's text said 2 a.m. 3 friends, 3 stories, 1 truth. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone, the reflection of a woman about to stop asking and start confirming. By the time Luke came downstairs that evening, I'd already rehearsed my lines in my head. He looked relaxed, fresh shirt, a trace of cologne, scrolling through his phone like the world was still in perfect order. I smiled when he walked in, pouring him a glass of wine, pretending to be the same wife he thought he knew. So, I asked, light as air, you had fun at Mark's last night? He nodded, no hesitation, no flicker of guilt. Yeah, we stayed up until 2, just talking. 2. The magic number from Carl's message. Interesting, I said, keeping my tone as soft as the candlelight between us. Because Mark said you left early, Dylan said you stayed late, and Carl said you ended up there. I watched it happen. The shift. His smile faltered just slightly before he caught himself. That's when I knew I wasn't wrong. He laughed too quickly. Oh, they're probably just mixing it up. You know how drunk everyone was. His voice tried to sound casual, but his hand gave him away, tapping the counter, restless. I leaned in, lowering my voice. Funny, I said. You didn't smell like beer. You smelled like Chanel. That stopped him cold. His eyes darted away, landing on anything but me. The silence that followed was almost kind. Almost. That silence between us stretched longer than it should have. You know the kind, thick enough to feel, thin enough to cut through with a single truth. He looked at me, searching for the right lie to crawl behind, but I didn't fill the space for him. I just let it hang there, watching the wheels turn behind his eyes. When he finally spoke, it was too careful, too edited. Hannah, you're overthinking this. I smiled, because that's what men say when you're dangerously close to being right. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The ache of doubt turned into something sharper. Focus. I realized I didn't need him to confess. Men like Luke don't confess. They unravel. All I had to do was pull the right thread. So I nodded, pretending to buy his story, even resting my hand briefly on his arm. He thought it was forgiveness. It wasn't. It was goodbye, written in advance. That night, lying next to him, I could hear his steady breathing, so calm, so practiced. I stared at the ceiling, tracing patterns in the dark, planning my next move. Tomorrow I'd start collecting facts, quietly, gently. The way women have learned to survive deceit, not by shouting, but by documenting. Because when the truth comes out, I want it to come from his own words, not mine. The next evening, I decided to start small. Not confrontation, confirmation. I opened my messages and typed to Carl, keeping it casual, warm. Hey Carl, thanks for keeping Luke out of trouble. He said you guys played cards until late. I added a little laughing emoji, the digital version of innocence. His reply came fast. Haha, yeah. He ditched us at midnight, though. Said he was meeting someone for a drink. My chest went tight. A drink. Someone. And there it was, the missing piece, falling neatly into place. I didn't react, not right away. I just stared at that message, reading it again and again, letting the words settle like dust after a storm. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but my mind was calm. That's the strange part. The moment you catch someone's lie, peace shows up in disguise. It's not rage, it's clarity. For the first time in months, I felt awake. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop and our shared bank account open. I wasn't looking for something specific, just following intuition's trail. And then, there it was, the Garden Lounge, 12:47 a.m., an upscale bar. Romantic, dimly lit, the kind of place you go to be seen with someone you shouldn't. My hand hovered over the mouse, steady, deliberate. The truth was no longer hiding. It was waiting for me to look it in the eye. I clicked on the charge, staring at the numbers like they were coordinates to betrayal. The Garden Lounge. I knew the place, soft jazz, candlelight, and whispers disguised as conversations. My stomach twisted, but my mind stayed eerily clear. If Luke wanted to gamble, I'd play the game better. I opened my phone and sent a message to Lydia, my friend who worked behind the bar. Hey, was Luke there last night? My thumb hovered before hitting send. The minutes between messages felt endless. I made coffee, poured it, didn't drink it. When my phone finally buzzed, I almost didn't want to look. Lydia's reply was short, but it hit like a blade. Yes, he was with a woman, blonde, red dress. They looked close. I read it twice, then a third time. My throat went dry, my vision blurred for a second. Not from shock, but from recognition. Deep down, I'd already known. I just needed the world to say it out loud. I leaned against the counter, letting the ache move through me. It wasn't the kind that makes you scream. It was the kind that hardens you quietly. My tears came without sound, and I let them fall, just once, before wiping them away. Because something inside me had shifted. The woman who doubted herself was gone. The one standing in her place was colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. I spent the rest of the day in silence, letting the truth settle into me like cold air. Every sound felt sharper, the ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, the faint echo of water pipes upstairs. He was home, humming again, moving around like everything was normal. I watched him from the hallway, my mind replaying Lydia's message, the red dress, the charge on the card. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance, like I was standing outside my own life, observing the scene from afar. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed while he brushed his teeth. He talked about work, the traffic, some meeting he had tomorrow. I nodded, but inside, I was cataloging every word, every lie, every careless detail. He didn't notice the way I studied him, the rhythm of a man who'd forgotten the difference between routine and deceit. When he turned off the light, I whispered a quiet goodnight that wasn't really one. It was more like a promise. As he drifted off, I stared into the dark, already seeing the next move unfold in my head. I wouldn't shout, I wouldn't beg, and I definitely wouldn't warn him. Lies only survive when they stay hidden, so I'd bring his into the light. On my terms, at my pace, because tomorrow the game would shift, and this time I'd be the one dealing the cards. That evening, I made his favorite dinner: rosemary chicken, mashed potatoes, and that bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. I suppose this counted. I hummed softly as I cooked, feeling lighter than I had in days. When he walked in, he looked surprised to see the table set, candles flickering. "Wow," he said, grinning. "What's all this?" I smiled back. "Just us. I missed having dinner together." The truth, buried neatly inside a lie. He talked, I listened. Or at least I pretended to. He laughed about work stories, complained about deadlines, and I played my part, nodding, smiling, pouring more wine. But beneath the warmth of that kitchen light, I was studying him like a map. Every blink, every twitch, every nervous sip. He didn't know that the ground beneath him was already shifting. I was setting the stage, and every bite he took brought him closer to the moment I'd flip it all. After dinner, as we sat at the table, I leaned back and said lightly, You know, it's funny how your friends can't seem to keep a story straight? His fork froze midair. What do you mean? He asked, that fake confusion men use when they're buying time. I tilted my head, smiling. Oh, just how Mark said one thing, Dylan another, Carl something else entirely. My tone was calm, gentle even, but my words were loaded. The silence that followed was sweeter than the wine. He tried to laugh it off, that nervous, forced chuckle that always gives guilt away. Oh, come on, Hannah. They were all drinking. You know how it is. Everyone remembers the night differently. I swirled the wine in my glass, letting the silence press against him before I spoke. You're right, I said softly. Except Mark remembers you leaving early. Dylan remembers you staying late. And Carl remembers you meeting someone. His smile twitched, but I didn't stop. And the garden lounge remembers her red dress. The fork slipped from his hand, clattering against the plate like a confession he couldn't control. His face drained of color. Hannah, it's not what you think, he stammered. I leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, my voice steady. Then what is it, Luke? Because I'm running out of versions, and the only thing I believe in right now is proof. His mouth opened, but no sound came. The lies had nowhere left to go. I unlocked my phone, laid it on the table, and turned the screen toward him. The bank charge, the texts, the timestamp, Lydia's message, every piece, lined up like cards in a perfect hand. You told me you were with friends, I said. I just didn't realize she was one of them. He reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back before he could touch me. You built your lie like a house of cards, I whispered. And tonight, I'm the wind. He sat there frozen, like the air had been pulled out of the room. His mouth opened and closed, searching for a sentence that could still save him. But there was nothing left to fix. Every time he'd chosen a lie, he'd chipped away at something real. I watched him squirm, his voice trembling with weak explanations, apologies that didn't even sound like his own. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. When I finally stood up, the chair scraped softly against the floor, and he flinched at the sound. You don't have to lie anymore, I said, my tone almost kind. You did it beautifully. You almost had me believing it. But the thing about lies, Luke, is they never match. Not the stories, not the smells, not the receipts. I smiled, not cruelly, just done. That smile of a woman who finally recognizes herself again. He reached for my arm, whispering, Please, Hannah, don't do this. I looked down at his hand, the same one that had typed those messages, touched someone else's skin, and I stepped back. You already did, I said quietly. I'm just making sure it counts. His eyes were wet now, and I could feel the first flicker of fear coming off him. Not because I'd yell or break something, but because I wouldn't. Because silence, when it's earned, can be far louder than rage. The next morning, I woke up before him. The light hadn't even reached the curtains yet, but I was wide awake, not restless, just done. My hands didn't shake as I typed the message. It was short, polite, almost cheerful. Gentlemen, I wrote, thank you for your honesty, in your own, unique ways. It helped me find out exactly where Luke spent his night. I'll make sure he spends all his future nights alone. I added a smiley face, because sometimes irony deserves punctuation. Then I hit send. I made coffee, poured a cup, and waited. It didn't take long. Hannah, he shouted from upstairs, his voice sharp, frantic. Footsteps thundered down the hall, the sound of panic dressed as anger. He came into the kitchen, phone in hand, face pale. What the hell did you do? He barked. I looked up, calm as ever, and smiled faintly. Just making sure the stories match now. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He didn't understand yet that peace can be more terrifying than rage. He paced, muttering, calling me crazy, but the words fell flat in the quiet. I just sipped my coffee and watched him spin, realizing for the first time what it feels like to lose control. He'd spent so long writing his own version of the story. Now I'd rewritten the ending, and made sure everyone had a copy. By noon, I'd already visited the bank. It was strange how easy it was, how the woman behind the counter smiled and said, "All done," without realizing she was witnessing the cleanest kind of escape. The lawyer had been discreet, efficient, and already in motion. Every signature I gave felt lighter than the one before, like I was untangling myself from invisible strings he didn't even know he'd tied around me. When I walked out into the sunlight, I felt something I hadn't in years: ownership. Not of money, of myself. That evening, I returned home just as he did. He looked drained, defeated, maybe still hoping to fix what couldn't be repaired. The suitcase by the door caught his eye first. Neat, closed, final. "What's this?" he asked, voice cracking. I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to hear the silence. Then I said, "You told your friends 3 stories. Now tell them this one, the one where you lost me." His eyes filled with disbelief, the kind of shock only liars feel when the story ends before they expect it to. He reached for the suitcase, but I stopped him with a simple look, the kind that says everything words can't. "You always thought the truth was something to avoid," I said softly. "Turns out, it was the only thing that could have saved you." And then, without another word, I opened the door. The cool air hit my face like a promise kept. Behind me, the house was still, silent, stripped of illusions, heavy with the echo of everything he'd never say. When I stepped outside, the world felt different. Not louder or brighter, just clearer. The air tasted like freedom, tinged with the bittersweet scent of endings. Behind me, the door clicked shut, and I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For years, I'd built my life around his versions of truth, stitching over inconsistencies like they were harmless mistakes. But today, every lie he'd ever told had become a brick in my escape route, and I walked it calmly, one step at a time. The messages kept coming that night, from his friends, from numbers I didn't recognize. Some were apologetic, some confused, a few even defensive. But I didn't answer any of them. I just watched the screen light up, proof that silence can make more noise than any argument. My phone buzzed again, then went still. That stillness, that's what I'd been craving. Later, as I packed the last of my things, I realized revenge wasn't the fire I thought it would be. It wasn't rage or destruction. It was balance. It was giving back the weight that was never mine to carry. When I turned off the lights for the last time, I felt no sadness, just the quiet satisfaction of a woman who finally told her story in full. The next one I knew would be mine alone to write. Months later, I found myself sitting in a small cafe by the sea, the kind of place where the world feels paused. The air smelled like salt and roasted coffee beans, and waves whispered against the shore, steady and endless. I'd been coming here for weeks, laptop open, rewriting my story 1 page at a time. The title was simple: The Night That Never Matched. It wasn't about Luke, not really. It was about every version of me that believed his words, and the one that finally stopped. The barista, a young woman with kind eyes, brought me my usual tea and smiled. "Writing something important?" she asked. I smiled back. "Yes," I said, "something that finally tells the truth." She nodded, unaware that I wasn't talking about the book. Every word I typed was a quiet victory, not against him, but against the silence I used to live in. I was no longer the woman who waited for the truth. I was the woman who wrote it. My phone buzzed once, face down on the table. I didn't need to check, but curiosity made me turn it over. His name, a single message: "I miss you." I was stupid. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I typed back, "You were inconsistent." Then, with one deep breath, I deleted the thread. His number, the ghost of his voice. Outside, the sun began to set, and I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because the story finally matched.